You don't need to come. Honestly, no one's expecting you. That's what my cousin said when I asked, just once, if there was something happening for her engagement. Her voice was casual, cold, as if I were some distant acquaintance, not someone who grew up beside her. I stared at the phone long after the call ended. My hand was shaking. I wanted to believe I misheard her, that it was just a bad choice of words, but I knew better. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message. That week the invitations went out. Not digital, real ones, gilded envelopes, custom calligraphy. Everyone was posting about them, proudly holding them up like golden tickets. Everyone except me. At first I played it off like it didn't bother me. I'm sure they just forgot, I told my mother. She raised an eyebrow, then changed the subject. No one believed me. Not even me. Every hour that passed without a message or a knock on my door felt like a slap. I refreshed my inbox, checked the mail twice a day. Nothing. I wasn't just left out, I was deliberately erased. The ache wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, almost dignified, but deep. A twisting pain that started low and spread until it reached my chest. I didn't cry. I just stopped smiling. You have to understand, this wasn't some random party. This was our family, our traditions, our milestones. We were raised on potlucks and noisy holidays, packed cars and shared bedrooms during summer visits. We were supposed to be inseparable, so when my name didn't appear on that invitation list, it wasn't just a paper I didn't receive. It was a bond cut. I started noticing the little signs. A group photo without me captioned, "All the cousins together again." A private Instagram story where they picked dresses together, laughed over wine. Even my own brother was in it. He said nothing to me. No explanation, no apology. I kept trying to make sense of it. Had I done something wrong? Had I offended someone? Was I too loud, too opinionated, too different? But no one ever said anything. They just excluded me like I never mattered. The worst part wasn't the silence. It was the pretending. Pretending I was okay. Pretending I had plans that weekend. Pretending I didn't refresh their stories over and over. Zooming in on every smiling face. Wondering how many people noticed I wasn't there. I kept telling myself I didn't need them, that I had better things to do, that I wasn't hurt. But I was. I was humiliated. And somewhere, beneath all that pain, a fire started to burn. It began as a flicker, just a small, stubborn sense that I deserved better, that maybe they didn't deserve me. That was the moment something shifted. I wasn't invited to their celebration, so what if I hosted my own? And what if, just maybe, everyone came to mine instead? Friends, let me take a quick pause. Could you do something for me? Drop a comment below and let me know. Where are you listening from? And tell me, have you ever been excluded like this? Has someone ever made you feel invisible when you should have been celebrated? If this story touches something in you, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing this video with a friend. That's how you help us grow and bring more powerful stories like this to life. All right, let's continue. It's one thing to be left out by friends. You tell yourself it's just a social circle, just personalities that didn't click. But when it's family, when it's the people who watched you grow, who sat beside you at birthdays and cried with you at funerals, that kind of silence, it cuts deeper. I watched the engagement unfold like I was outside a window, peering in. Everywhere I turned, there were whispers, plans being made, dresses being altered, jokes about seating charts and playlists and signature cocktails. But none of those whispers were meant for me. Not a single one. Group chats that I used to be part of were suddenly quiet on my phone, but not for anyone else. I saw my cousin's name pop up in family threads, but only when I wasn't active. Photos started circulating, not even from the party yet, just the preparation. Outfits laid out on beds, aesthetic flat lays of invitations, smiles already forming before the camera even flashed. And I was invisible. No one said it directly, no one told me I wasn't invited. They just let me find out by watching the world move without me. They let me piece it together like a puzzle, missing half its pieces. And the most painful part, not one person asked if I was okay. My aunt, who once braided my hair and called me my second daughter, posted a long caption about how proud she was. My name wasn't in it. My presence wasn't missed. I was erased. Even my brother, my own flesh and blood, sent in a playlist for the event. I saw it on his screen by accident one evening when he left his laptop open. He looked at me and quickly shut it, as if guilt could be clicked away. He didn't explain. He just changed the subject and walked off. That night I didn't sleep. I laid in the dark, trying to remember if I'd done something to deserve this. Did I miss a birthday? Did I say something wrong? Had I become too much, too loud, too proud, too honest? Or was I simply inconvenient now? Not easy to box in. Not easy to control. Not the kind of person they could parade around without feeling threatened. There's a loneliness that comes when the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally don't even bother to pretend. It wraps around your throat. It presses on your chest. And yet you keep smiling, because admitting it hurts would make it real. And I wasn't ready to give them that power. So I laughed when someone mentioned the party. "Oh, I didn't get an invite," I said, as if it were a joke. As if I hadn't already torn through the mailbox 3 times that day. As if I hadn't stared at my cousin's engagement photos until the tears blurred them. As if I didn't ache to be there. But I wasn't wanted. And once I accepted that, something inside me hardened. Not bitter. Not cruel. Just done. Done begging to be included. Done shrinking myself to fit their expectations. Done waiting for a seat at a table they clearly didn't want me at. That was the moment I stopped asking why they didn't choose me, and started thinking about what I would choose instead. Because if they didn't see my worth, I would show it to the world. It was late evening when I heard it. One of those quiet, heavy hours when the house hums low and voices carry more than they should. I was walking down the hallway, barefoot, heading to the kitchen for a glass of water. The door was half open. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but some words don't wait for permission. They just hit you in the chest. Raw, uninvited, unavoidable. "She's too much," my mother said, her voice low and tired. "You know how she is. Always needs to be the center of everything. That's why they didn't ask her to come." And then a silence so loud it rang in my ears. My aunt didn't disagree. She didn't rush to say, "That's not true," or "You're being unfair." She just let the silence linger, like agreement, like confirmation, like the truth had finally been spoken. I stood there frozen. Not out of shock, but recognition. Some part of me had always feared they thought that way. That I wasn't just overlooked. I was resented. Not for what I'd done, but for who I was. Too loud, too expressive, too passionate, too visible. I laughed too freely, dressed too boldly, spoke my mind when I should have kept quiet. I wasn't the kind of daughter you proudly mentioned at brunch. I wasn't the safe choice. I was the wild card, the one who might say something real and ruin the performance. And the people who should have loved me because of that had learned to hide me, to dim me, to erase me when it didn't suit them. I stepped back from the door, slowly, holding my breath like it could hold in the heartbreak. And I went back to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed, water glass forgotten, and stared at the wall. Not crying, not yelling, just unraveling in complete silence. Because what do you do when the betrayal isn't from strangers, but from the woman who raised you? When her voice doesn't defend you behind closed doors, but instead becomes just another knife in your back. I thought about every time I had shown up, every celebration I helped plan, every gift I bought with care, every favor I agreed to without question, every time I clapped the loudest for someone else's success, not because I had to, but because love should look like that. And yet, when it was my turn, when I needed love that didn't ask me to shrink, no one showed up, not even her. That was the night the ache changed. It stopped being grief and started becoming clarity. I wasn't difficult. I was just different. And that made me inconvenient for a family that valued appearances over authenticity. They didn't want me to sit quietly in the back row, but they also didn't want me shining too brightly in the front. So they pushed me out entirely. And suddenly I was done trying to earn a place where I was merely tolerated. Done apologizing for taking up space. Done softening my edges to fit into boxes I never belonged in. If I was too much for them, maybe I'd start being just enough for myself. And one day, they'd see exactly what they chose to exclude. I smiled when I saw the photos. Not the forced kind with teeth clenched and eyes cold. No, I made it believable. I even tilted my head, added a soft little heart emoji, and wrote beneath my cousin's post, "So beautiful. Wishing you both all the happiness in the world." It got 3 likes. No reply. But that wasn't the part that hurt. The part that hurt was how easy it was for them to go on, to celebrate, to post and tag and laugh like I was never meant to be there in the first place. One photo especially stayed with me, my brother standing next to my cousin, their arms around each other, beaming. My brother. The same boy who used to crawl into my bed when he was afraid of thunderstorms. The same person who just last month asked me to help him rehearse a job interview. He hadn't said a word to me about the party. Not before, not during, not after. When I saw the photo, my stomach twisted. But still, I smiled. Because that's what you do when your pain isn't safe anywhere else. You hold it behind your teeth, dress it up in manners, and pretend you're fine. No one wants to hear that you cried looking at a picture, that your hands trembled as you scrolled, that you stared too long at each face, quietly counting all the people who didn't notice you were missing. So you perform. You keep up the act. You become your own ghost, drifting through moments that were once yours, now belonging to someone else. And yet, as I smiled, something was breaking inside me, quietly, without sound or ceremony, like a slow, steady crack through glass. But beneath that crack, something else stirred. A spark, a flicker, a question I hadn't dared ask before. What if I stopped pretending? What if I didn't just sit in the shadows and wait for someone to call my name? What if I lit my own lamp instead? It wasn't about vengeance. I didn't want to hurt them, not even after everything. What I wanted was to exist, fully, boldly, without apology. I was tired of being the extra, the afterthought, the one they only invited when it was convenient. I was tired of dimming my light just so others could shine without feeling threatened. I was tired of being told, directly or not, that my voice was too loud, my joy too much, my heart too open. So I smiled at the pictures, and then I shut my phone off, sat in silence, and whispered a quiet promise to myself. Never again will I wait to be included. Next time I'll be the one sending the invitations. And when I do, they'll know exactly what they left behind. That night, my room felt smaller than ever. Not physically, but emotionally, spiritually. Like the walls were pressing in, like the air itself knew I was swallowing something too bitter to name. The light from my phone flickered across my face as I stared into the void of everyone else's joy, everyone else's connection, everyone else's togetherness. And I was alone. Not just physically. Lonely is something you feel even when the house is full. Even when you live under the same roof as people who once kissed your scraped knees and clapped at your school plays. I sat there in the dark, knees pulled to my chest, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself feel everything. No more pretending, no more brushing it off, no more, I'm fine, I didn't want to go anyway. Because I did. I did want to go. I wanted to be part of the laughter. I wanted to belong. I wanted to be included not out of guilt, but because I mattered. But the truth hit me like a slow-moving storm. This wasn't just about one party. This wasn't just one forgotten invitation or one unreturned message. It was a pattern, a slow, quiet erasure that had been happening for years. Moments that I had shrugged off. Excuses I had given them. Stories I had told myself to protect my heart. Like the time they all went on a weekend trip and said, "Oh, we thought you were busy." Or when I found out about a baby shower after it had already happened. The birthdays I wasn't invited to but heard about afterward. The group photos where I was the only one missing. The whispered plans just outside earshot. The way conversations stopped when I entered a room. The sudden awkward glances exchanged when I asked, "What are you guys talking about?" Every memory came flooding in. Like shattered glass on the floor, glittering and sharp. And I had to walk through it barefoot. The realization was brutal. It wasn't that I had done something wrong. It was that I had been quietly cast as the outsider in my own story, by people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. And maybe they did, in their own way, in their safe, quiet, controlled way, as long as I stayed small, as long as I didn't take up too much space, as long as I didn't shine too brightly or speak too passionately or feel too deeply. But I couldn't shrink anymore. I had done that for years. And all it gave me was an empty room and a stomach full of rage. I cried, but it wasn't soft. It wasn't delicate or cinematic. It was guttural, hot, angry, not just because they hurt me, but because I had let them do it for so long. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the pictures off my walls. I wanted to run away, disappear, erase myself before they could erase me again. But underneath all that rage, there was something else. Something steadier. Something stronger. Resolve. It came quietly at first, like a whisper. You don't have to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it. And then louder. You don't need permission to be powerful, to be joyful, to be seen. My tears dried. My breathing slowed. And I looked around that empty room not as a prison, but as a starting line. If they wanted me to feel small, they were about to see what happened when I stood up at full height. Because yes, I had been left out. Again and again. But the difference now? I wasn't going to wait for a seat at their table. I would build my own. Set it with care. Fill it with light. And I would make sure it had room for everyone. Even the ones who never made space for me. But I wouldn't build it out of spite. I would build it out of truth. Out of dignity. Out of self-respect. And when they saw it, When they saw the celebration I created from the ashes of their silence, they would know exactly what they had chosen to exclude. When dawn broke the next morning, I sat at my grandmother's old oak table, a battered notebook open before me. The pages stared back at me, blank and expectant, like they knew this was a moment of reckoning. My hands trembled as I picked up a pen, not with the weight of anger, but with the fierce determination of someone reclaiming her life. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was drawing the blueprint of my own renewal. I wrote of truth, the truth that family isn't just blood, but the people who choose to stand with you. I wrote of dignity, the quiet power that comes from speaking your worth out loud, even if your voice shakes. I wrote of loss, what it meant to be erased from the world you grew up in, and how that loss had opened a door to something new. Page after page filled with ideas. What kind of gathering would feel like me? What warmth could I pour into a room that would drown out the memory of their exclusion? Food became symbolism. Dishes my grandmother taught me, recipes passed down through generations, each bite a taste of belonging that I would offer to anyone who felt left out. Music became confession, a soundtrack of songs that spoke of resilience and hope, carefully chosen so every note would echo my reclaimed strength. Light became the guiding theme, candles and fairy lights draped across windows, a promise that no one who walked through my doors would ever feel hidden again. Every detail mattered. I envisioned invitations in handwritten script on thick ivory cardstock. No gilded envelopes, just honesty in every loop and curve of the letters. No guest list to exclude anyone. I would write, "You are invited," instead of naming names, because this celebration would belong to anyone who believed in second chances. I sketched centerpieces that combined wildflowers and glass jars, fragile yet vibrant, reflecting the truth that beauty can spring from brokenness. As my plan took shape, the ache that once hollowed my chest softened into a steady beat of purpose. I wasn't lashing back, I was building forward. I closed the notebook, fingers stained with ink, and felt a fierce joy I hadn't known in weeks. This was more than a party. It was my declaration that I would no longer wait for permission to be seen. I tucked the notebook under my arm and stood ready to turn pain into possibility. If they wouldn't celebrate me, I would celebrate myself, and in doing so, I would create a space where everyone was welcome. When the invitations were ready, I held one in my hand and felt its weight. Thick, creamy paper embossed with gold leaf, the edges gently deckled. The words were simple but deliberate. You are invited to a night of light and gratitude. All are welcome. No names, no fine print, no exclusions. I took a photo of the stack on my kitchen counter and posted it to my stories, not tagging anyone but letting the image speak for itself. The caption read, "Opening doors coming soon." Within minutes, friends near and far began to message me. "This looks amazing. Can't wait. Count me in." Some asked if it was a birthday. No, it wasn't. An anniversary? Not that either. They sensed something different, a quiet power, an unspoken promise that this gathering was more than just an event. It was a refuge. Then, just as I expected, they noticed. My aunt was the first to break the silence. She texted, "Is this for my daughter's engagement celebration?" A thinly veiled attempt to reclaim relevance. I replied, "This is for everyone who's ever felt unseen." Silence. Next, a cousin forwarded the invitation to the family chat with a shrug emoji. Someone joked, "Did we forget to RSVP?" And just like that, the group buzzed. Questions, comments, confessions. Many expressed regret at not thinking of something like this themselves. Others admitted quietly that they'd never had a party that felt so inclusive. I watched the messages as they rolled in, my heart steady with calm satisfaction. I wasn't here to shame anyone. I wasn't here to score points. I was here to demonstrate what celebration could look like when it emerged from honesty and open arms, rather than habit and exclusion. Meanwhile, neighbors and colleagues, people I'd invited on impulse when the idea struck, responded with genuine delight. "I've always wanted to come to something like this," they wrote. "Thank you for hosting." The range of responses became my validation. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could create something real, something nourishing, something that resonated with the people who mattered most, whether by blood or by choice. Days later, I hand-delivered a few invitations to the houses of those who'd hurt me, placing them gently on their doorsteps. I wanted them to pause and consider what this invitation really meant, an opportunity to fill a seat at a table they'd once ignored. The evening air was warm when I slipped the final envelope under my cousin's doormat. In that moment, I felt no malice, only resolve. I pictured her finding it, temptation humming through her fingertips as she lifted it up. Because the true power of an invitation isn't in the paper itself. It's in the choice it offers, to accept or to remain absent. By the time the RSVP started to pour in, names I hadn't heard from in months, and names I'd never even expected, I knew I'd already won. Not a battle of pride or petty revenge, but a victory of grace, of dignity. A testament that when exclusion nailed you to the floor, you could stand up and hold out your hand to the world instead. And everyone was noticing that hand. The day I sent out those invitations, I watched my phone with a nervous thrill, only to find nothing. Not a single reply. The family chat, once a flurry of memes and weekend plans, lay dead as a tomb. My message sat at the top like a challenge unanswered. I felt my heart twist. Had I misjudged them? Did my gesture somehow scare them off? Then, a shiver in the void. A distant cousin pinged. "This sounds amazing. Are you okay?" Others followed in trickles, careful commas, ellipses, tentative words. "Everything all right? Do you need anything?" "We'll come if you really want us to." Their concern felt like a double-edged blade, soft but cutting. They saw pain where I was forging power. They assumed I needed comfort, when what I needed was presence. So I tapped out a reply and typed 2 simple words, smiling to myself as I hit send. "You'll see." I closed my eyes and breathed deep. The silence pressed against me, but instead of fear, I felt patience blooming. I had laid out a promise in ink and paper. Now it was time to let it blossom on its own terms. All day, the quiet hummed around me. I set out candles on the mantelpiece, tall glass cylinders glowing like watchtowers against the dark. I hung strings of fairy lights across the porch roof, their tiny bulbs waiting to wink to life. I arranged jars of wildflowers along the windowsill, their colors vivid against the late summer dusk. Each time my phone buzzed, my heart leapt, only to settle when I saw it was just a notification for a work email or a late-night meme from a friend. But I resisted the urge to scroll away my own plans. Instead, I placed my phone face down and let the world hum. As the evening shadows deepened, I felt the invitation's echo pulse through the silence. It was a quiet drumbeat in my chest, an invitation to my own soul, reminding me that some of the most powerful things begin in the hush before the storm. And then, just as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, messages began to flow. One by one, names appeared on my screen, old friends I'd forgotten to call, neighbors I'd waved to through windows, even the cousins who'd once pushed me aside. Their words still trembled with uncertainty, but beneath the hesitance there was a promise. They would come. I watched each RSVP confirm, and with every name, the room around me seemed to glow a little brighter. The silence that had once felt like rejection transformed into anticipation. I realized in that moment that waiting isn't always passive. Sometimes it's the greatest act of faith, faith in yourself and in the invitation you extend to the world. So I stood in the glow of half-lit candles and whispered into the dark, "You'll see." And I believed it. When the evening arrived, my home transformed into a living canvas of intention. I moved through each room with purpose, arranging centerpieces I'd crafted by hand, mason jars filled with wildflowers I'd picked at dawn, goldenrod, Queen Anne's lace, and lavender, tied with pieces of twine from my grandmother's sewing kit. Each stem held a memory. Childhood summers chasing butterflies through her garden, whispered secrets shared beneath the honeysuckle vine. The playlist I curated was a tapestry of songs that spoke of journey and healing, the soft ache of a cello in the opening bars, a voice that trembled with longing, lyrics that whispered of rising again after being cast down. I listened as I arranged the stereo, closing my eyes to feel how each melody settled into the space, promising that every heart there would find its own echo. In the kitchen, I moved with the certainty of ritual, my grandmother's recipes handwritten on yellowed index cards, guided me. I rolled out pastry dough for savory tarts filled with roasted root vegetables and honey-glazed onions, the fragrance of thyme and rosemary drifting through the air like a benediction. I stirred creamy mashed potatoes, adding cream and butter until they glowed like soft sunshine, and baked a loaf of bread so crusty that when it cracked under my knife, steam rose like a blessing. I paused at each step, tasting, remembering why I chose these dishes, how my grandmother's kitchen had once smelled of laughter and late-night stories, how breaking fresh bread had always meant sharing. This food would be more than sustenance. It would be a communion, a way of saying, "Here, take a piece of my history, of my hope." Candles flickered in every corner, their flames dancing on walls painted with photographs of life's hidden moments. A sunflower bowing under summer rain, two hands clasped in solidarity, a child's grin catching the light. These images were my quiet testimony, that beauty exists even when you think you've been forgotten. By the front door I set out a guest book bound in leather, its pages blank and waiting for signatures and messages. I imagined each person arriving, pausing for a moment to consider what this night meant to them, then writing their name as proof they'd been seen. When the last dish was prepared and the final light lit, I stepped back and surveyed the room bathed in golden glow. It wasn't just a party, it was a reclaiming of space, of self, of the right to be celebrated on my own terms. My heart thrummed with anticipation. I realized that every detail I'd poured into this evening was a piece of my story, a story of exclusion turned into inclusion, of silent pain transformed into a chorus of voices. And as I stood there, alone in the soft hush before the first knock, I felt a profound truth settle within me. This night belonged to everyone who had ever felt erased, and together we would fill the room with laughter, with presence, with the undeniable proof that no one could dim our light unless we let them. When the sun rose on the day of their celebration, I checked my phone. Still nothing. No late-night texts, no last-minute apologies, no nervous good luck wishes. It was as if the world outside my walls had forgotten I even existed. By late morning, though, rumors began to trickle in. A caterer stranded in traffic, an argument between the florist and the event planner over missing centerpieces, the DJ who'd left because the venue had double booked. My cousin's carefully curated day was unraveling, like a dress coming undone at the seams. I sipped my coffee calmly, running a finger over the rim of my mug, the steam curling upward like a silent question. "Are you ready?" Meanwhile, my own celebration was swelling with life. Morning RSVPs arrived in waves, co-workers who'd only chatted at the water cooler, neighbors who'd always waved from across the street, friends from distant cities who booked trains just to be there. Each name was a quiet victory, a testament to the connections I'd nurtured when my family had let me fade into the background. By noon, the whispers about their party felt like distant thunder. I read about the photographer who canceled because he'd been double booked, the venue manager scrambling to fix an air conditioning unit that had died in the heat, the guests complaining about stale hors d'oeuvres. A friend texted me with a link to a live feed of their event. A shaky video of uncomfortable smiles, half-empty tables, guests checking their watches. I felt a pang of something dark and fleeting, but I caught myself before it turned into gloating. Because this wasn't about exacting revenge, it was about truth. At 2 p.m., I stepped outside to arrange a sign by my driveway. Tonight, a celebration of light. Doors open at 6, all are welcome. I watched the ribbon flutter in the gentle breeze, the late summer air warm against my skin. My heart swelled as I realized that while their day was falling apart, mine was just beginning to come alive. Messages kept arriving. "So excited! Do you need help setting up? Tell me if there's anything I can bring." Each offer of assistance came with genuine warmth, a stark contrast to the perfunctory exchanges I'd endured before. By afternoon, I could almost taste the evening's promise. The garden glowed with anticipation, candles flickering in glass jars, tables draped with soft linens, wildflowers nodding in the breeze. My playlist filled the air through hidden speakers, each song a reminder that resilience can be gentle yet unbreakable. And though I'd heard the chaos at their event, I didn't need to see the footage again. I knew exactly what I'd created, a space where every guest was cherished, where no one felt like an afterthought. As the sun dipped lower, I found myself smiling, not out of triumph, but out of profound gratitude. Gratitude for the friends and strangers who chose to stand with me. Gratitude for the hard lessons that forged my resolve. Because on this day, their day of regret and frustration, I was already living the day I'd longed for, one of warmth, connection, and the unshakable knowledge that I would never again wait to be invited into someone else's story. By evening, the golden light of sunset streamed through the windows, mingling with the soft glow of every candle I had lit. My home, once silent and empty, now pulsed with warmth and life. Music floated through the air, notes of piano and guitar weaving a gentle tapestry that invited feet to sway and hearts to open. Guests arrived in a steady flow. College friends I hadn't seen in years, their faces lighting up when they recognized me. Neighbors who'd waved from across the street but never crossed the threshold, now stepping inside as if they'd discovered a secret garden. Old family friends who remembered my childhood laughter and cried when they hugged me, whispering, "We had to be here." There were no awkward gaps or forced smiles. Instead, every corner of the house was filled with genuine connection. A roommate from my first job held a plate of food he'd brought, eyes shining as he said, "I know how it feels to be overlooked. You deserve every ounce of joy tonight." A cousin twice removed, someone I barely knew, stayed by my side, marveling at the wildflower centerpieces, asking how I found the lavender so perfectly fragrant. Laughter erupted around me like fireworks, spontaneous and pure. I watched as people found one another, friends meeting strangers and discovering unexpected common ground, exchanging stories of heartbreak and triumph, tears of empathy mingling with laughter until their cheeks ached. I saw old classmates, once polite acquaintances, lean in and speak from the heart, sharing memories I thought had faded forever. In the kitchen, someone strummed a quiet tune on my grandmother's guitar, the melody rolling through the rooms and drawing others into an impromptu chorus. We sang softly, voices rising together, each note a shared affirmation that we belonged. I moved through the crowd, offering glasses of sparkling juice and bites of honey-glazed tarts, feeling the weight of every hug, every "I'm so glad you did this," every lingering glance that said, "We see you, we celebrate you." No one glanced at their phones for notifications about another event. No one checked the time out of boredom. There was only this moment, this night of reclaimed belonging. When the breeze drifted in and carried the scent of jasmine and candles into the street, a neighbor who'd never spoken more than hi at the fence leaned over and said, "Your home feels like hope. Thank you for inviting us in." And I realized this was more than a party. It was a testament that when you build with authenticity, you fill not only a room but hearts. When you offer space without judgment, people bring their truest selves. As laughter and music swirled around me, I felt my chest expand with gratitude and power. Every knock on my door, every footstep across my threshold, every smile that lit up my living room was proof. I was never invisible. I was simply waiting for the right moment to be seen. And tonight I shone. They arrived just as the lanterns outside my front window flickered to life. My aunt and cousin, hand in hand, their expressions as study in shock, and something else I'd longed to see, uncertainty. My aunt's heels paused on the doorstep as if she'd forgotten the rest of the sentence she'd rehearsed the night before. My cousin's gown, still the rose-pink shade she'd intended for her own party, looked out of place here, caught between two worlds. They hovered in the threshold, framed by the warm glow behind me, and I felt the hush ripple through the crowd. Conversations tapered off, forks paused halfway to mouths, music softened to a whisper. All eyes turned toward the door, but only two sets held that particular mix of hesitation and recognition. My heart thumped, not with fear or triumph, but with an odd tenderness. I remembered the little girl who once played dress-up with that same cousin, twirling in borrowed gowns in her grandmother's living room. I remembered the aunt who used to tuck me into bed and sing lullabies when I was sick. I stepped forward, into the hallway light, and paused. They looked at me, really looked. Their eyes flicked from my face to the room behind me, the wildflowers glowing in the dusk, the leather guest book waiting for signatures, the swirl of strangers and friends who now formed my family. I saw my aunt's jaw twitch as she swallowed something. I wasn't sure if it was regret or relief. My cousin's lips pressed together, as though she longed to speak, but words had abandoned her. I opened my arms, not in accusation, but in invitation. "Welcome," I said, voice steady and warm. "I'm so glad you decided to come." For a long moment they stood rooted. Then my aunt placed a tentative hand on my shoulder, as if testing the ground. My cousin exhaled, shoulders dropping, and she stepped forward into the light, offering me a shy, uncertain smile. Behind them, the room exhaled too. Smiles returned, conversation resumed, and a quiet chorus of acceptance rippled through the air. They weren't just guests who'd changed their minds. They were witnesses to something larger than any single celebration. That night, their arrival wasn't an apology. It was an acknowledgement. An admission that the story they'd tried to write without me had missed its most important character. And as they took their place among the circle of candles and laughter, I saw in their eyes what I'd been yearning for, the realization that no one builds a celebration alone, and that sometimes the most powerful invitations are the ones you extend to yourself. When I saw them standing there, a flicker of old resentment flared inside me, an echo of all the nights I'd spent wondering if I'd ever matter to them. I could have let that flame guide me, could have built a wall as high as their exclusion, slamming the door in their faces. I could have asked them to leave, reminded them of every lonely moment they'd caused. But instead, I felt something deeper rise up, a calm certainty that this moment belonged to truth, not retaliation. I stepped forward, drawing in a steady breath, scented with candle wax and laughter. The crowd behind me hushed, sensing the weight of what was unfolding. My aunt's eyes glistened with uncertainty. My cousin's lips quivered as if she feared I would reject them once more. I smiled. Not the polite, brittle smile I'd perfected for social media. A real smile that reached my eyes, warmed my chest, and bridged every fracture we'd ever had. "Welcome," I said, my voice soft but unwavering. "You're right on time." Their faces shifted, confusion giving way to relief, remorse melting into gratitude. My aunt's hand trembling in mine carried years of unspoken apologies. My cousin's nod was small, but it held a universe of forgiveness. In that instant, I felt a surge of power so pure it was like standing at the center of a sunbeam. This was justice not served cold, but with an open hand. I wasn't avenging myself. I was affirming my worth by offering them a place at my table. Around us, the room exhaled. Candles flickered brighter, laughter resumed in ripples, and the music swelled as though the very walls rejoiced. I realized that dignity isn't found in retaliation. It's found in choosing your own kindness, even when you have every reason not to. As my aunt and cousin joined the circle of friends who had come to celebrate me, I knew they would never see me as invisible again. This moment, this act of grace when I could have shut them out, was the turning point. It wasn't about proving who was right or wrong. It was about reclaiming my story, writing the next chapter with compassion instead of spite. And as we all raised our glasses together, the light in their eyes reflected back to me the truth I'd always carried, that power lies not in pushing others away, but in lifting everyone into the glow you create. The music slowed to a gentle hum as conversations deepened, and I found myself at the center of a circle I never dreamed I'd lead. One by one, people offered toasts, not the perfunctory cheers of polite gatherings, but heartfelt words carried on rising voices. A childhood friend spoke of how I'd lifted her up when she felt broken. A neighbor recalled how I'd brought her soup on a cold night when no one else knew she was ill. Every memory felt like a silver tray laid before me, heavy with the truth of who I'd always been beneath their assumptions. I felt my heart swell, as strangers turned friends recounted moments of kindness I'd forgotten I'd performed. The time I stayed late after work to help a coworker study for certification, even though it cost me sleep. The afternoon I'd sat with an elderly tenant who'd lost her cat, holding her hand until she smiled again. These stories weren't grand gestures. They were small acts of presence and care, the quiet currencies of belonging. And there, Among these affirmations stood my family. At first their faces were pale, as if the gentle spotlight of praise shone too brightly on all they'd overlooked. Their eyes darted, as though seeking an escape from a spotlight that revealed their own absence. I watched my aunt press her lips together, her gaze flicking to my grandmother's photograph on the mantel, as though hoping for guidance. My cousin's cheeks flushed as someone recounted how I'd once comforted her after a heartbreak, how I'd held her hand and whispered that she deserved better. Each story they heard was a mirror, reflecting the light they tried to dim, and it shone back twice as strong. I saw shoulders relax as they realized that my value had never depended on their invitation. It had been present all along, quietly weaving itself into the lives of everyone willing to notice. I drifted through the room, touching shoulders, whispering thanks, letting the warmth wash over me. In that moment, I understood that justice doesn't always arrive with thunderous retribution. Sometimes it arrives in hushed confessions and knowing smiles, in the soft clink of glasses raised in genuine admiration. By the time the candles burned low, my family had joined the chorus. My aunt's voice trembled as she offered her own toast, a tribute to my resilience, to the sister she was proud of but had shamefully forgotten to include. My cousin's eyes shone with tears as she spoke of regret and hope, promising that next time she would never let me stand outside her world again. I held their words calmly, letting them settle around my shoulders like a shawl. It wasn't a moment of triumph over them. It was a moment of unity, of recognition that our bonds were worth mending. The pain of exclusion had become the impetus for a deeper connection, forged on the anvil of truth, served on these silver trays of memory. As the last guest drifted into the night, I stood at the doorstep and watched the flicker of lanterns fade into the darkness. Inside, the echoes of laughter and confession lingered, a testament to a celebration that had transcended any single party. In that glow I knew the light they tried to extinguish had only grown brighter, carried by every soul who chose to celebrate authenticity over appearances, presence over pretense, and love over fear. Shall we move on to the final chapter? When dawn's first light filtered through the curtains, the house was quiet, its walls still humming with the echoes of laughter and confession from the night before. I stood in the living room, the scattered petals of wildflowers crunching under my bare feet, and inhaled the lingering scent of candle wax and roasted thyme. They never offered a formal apology, no tearful speeches or written letters filled with regret. They didn't need to, because something far more enduring had taken root in the spaces between us. The unspoken promise that I would never again be treated like an afterthought. In the days that followed, invitations came easily. A cousin asked if I'd join her for coffee. My brother called to pick my brain about planning a small dinner for his new job. My aunt sent a text, "Thinking of you today, let's catch up soon?" Each message was casual in tone, but I felt the weight of it all. The respect that had been earned, the awareness that exclusion could no longer be their default. I smiled as I replied, "I'd love that." Building my own celebration had done more than fill a single night with warmth. It had reset the ground beneath our family's feet. They had seen that kindness need not come with conditions, that generosity of spirit could transform hurt into healing. They had witnessed a feast laid out not with spite, but with open hands, and they had been moved. From that moment on, our gatherings changed. Tables were set with extra chairs, and no one on the guest list was presumed absent. I watched as they learned a new rhythm, checking in with me first, including me in plans, valuing my presence instead of overlooking it. It wasn't perfection. Old habits sometimes resurfaced in quiet moments. But the gap between intention and action had narrowed irrevocably. And for me, the greatest gift was something I hadn't even realized I'd been seeking: the freedom to define my own worth. I no longer saw myself through the lens of their acceptance or rejection. My identity, my joy, my belonging came from the fire I stoked within myself, and from the people who chose to come to a celebration born of truth and grace. Years later, when I look back on that night, I remember the soft glow of candles and the hush of surprise in their eyes when they found my door open. I remember the sound of voices rising together in song, the taste of fresh bread breaking in half, the way wildflowers nodded in approval. I remember the fierce thrill of standing tall in a room filled with hearts I had drawn with honesty. They never apologized, but they never excluded me again. Because that night proved what exclusion could never extinguish, a light kindled from within, powerful enough to illuminate an entire world. When you're not invited to someone else's table, you can wait in shadow, or you can build your own, set it with care, and watch who comes to share in the warmth you've created. And when they arrive, you'll know you've already won.